My best friend's widow showed up a year after he died. He left you this? I was stunned. The morning Claire Mercer knocked on my door. I had not shaved in 4 days. I was still wearing the same gray shirt I'd slept in, and the only thing on my kitchen counter was a half-empty bottle of hot sauce and 3 dishes I had no intention of washing. It was a Saturday. I had nowhere to be. That had been the whole problem for a while now. She knocked twice, soft but certain, not the kind of knock that apologizes for itself. I opened the door and just stood there. Claire was standing on my front step in a dark green jacket, her dark hair pulled back at her neck, a paper grocery bag against one hip, and a wooden box tucked under her other arm. The box was small, maybe the size of a shoebox, worn smooth at the corners. She looked tired in the way that goes past one bad night, the kind of tired that settles in around the eyes and does not fully leave. I had not seen her in almost 4 months, not since the memorial. "Hey, Owen," she said. "Hey." She nodded toward the wooden box. "Can I come in? He left you something." I stepped back without thinking. That was all I could do. She walked past me into the front room, and I shut the door behind her, and the whole house felt different than it had 10 seconds ago. Marcus Mercer had been my best friend since the 7th grade, 22 years. We had shared a dorm room, stood beside each other at each other's worst jobs, driven through 2 states at midnight because one of us needed to not be in the same city for a night. He was the kind of person who called you back, who remembered the thing you mentioned 3 months ago in passing, who showed up. He died 14 months before that morning. A blood clot, sudden, no warning, no slow build. Just a Thursday afternoon, and then a phone call I did not understand, at first because it made no sense. I had not handled the year after especially well. I kept working, I kept paying my bills. I smiled when people needed me to smile. But the apartment felt like a place I was staying in temporarily, and I had stopped making plans further out than the end of the week. Not because I was broken. I just did not see the point in filling the calendar when the person I would have talked it all through with was gone. Claire set the grocery bag on my kitchen table. I looked at it. "You brought food. You have hot sauce and nothing else in there. I checked while you were parking my car once. It was already bad then." She pulled out bread, a container of soup, and a paper bag that smelled like the bakery on Clement Street that Marcus used to drag us both to on Sunday mornings. Because he said their coffee cake was the only honest thing left in the city. I had to look away from that last part. She set the wooden box on the table beside everything else. She did not open it yet. She just sat down in the chair across from mine and folded her hands together and looked at me. "How are you actually doing?" she asked. "Not how are you, actually doing." "I'm fine, Owen. I'm functional," I said, "which is different." She nodded like that was the answer she expected, and was not going to pretend it was good enough, but also was not going to fight me about it. That was a very Claire thing to do. I had always known that about her, even from the edges. When Marcus and I would all end up in the same room, she was the one who listened before she spoke. She did not fill silence because silence made her uncomfortable. She filled it when she had something real to say. Marcus used to talk about her like she was the most sensible thing that had ever happened to him. He said it exactly like that once, sitting on the tailgate of his truck outside a hardware store, just completely unprompted. "She is the most sensible thing that has ever happened to me, Owen." I told him that was an odd way to compliment your wife. He said he meant it as the highest one he knew. Now she was sitting at my kitchen table with the box he had left me, and she looked like a woman who had been carrying something heavier than wood and whatever was inside it. I sat down. "He told me about it," she said. "Not right at the end. He told me about it a few months before, when he first got the diagnosis." I went still. The blood clot was sudden. "The first thing they found was not." She said it quietly. "There was something else before. He did not tell you because he was still deciding what it meant, and then the clot happened first, and he never got to give this to you himself." She pushed the box toward me. "He made me promise." I looked at the box. I did not touch it. "Claire, I know," she said. "Just that. I know." I picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. The wood was dark, some kind of walnut maybe, sanded smooth. There was a small brass latch on the front that opened clean. I set the lid back. Inside was a folded letter on top. Below the letter, a photograph, a pocket knife with a wooden handle that I recognized immediately, because I had given it to him as a birthday gift when we were 19, and he had kept it for 23 years. Below the knife, a small envelope sealed with tape, and beneath that, a USB drive with a piece of tape on the side that said, "Play this first," in Marcus's handwriting. I stared at that handwriting for longer than I should have. Claire had her hands wrapped around a mug she had found in my cabinet and filled from my kitchen tap. She was not looking at me with pity. She was looking at me like someone who was also deciding how to breathe through a room that suddenly felt too full. "You don't have to open it today," she said. "I know." I picked up the USB drive. "Did you know what was on it?" He told me a little, not all of it. He said some of it was for you specifically. She paused. "He said you'd understand things on it that I wouldn't, and I'd understand things on it that you wouldn't." He wasn't wrong. I set the drive down and picked up the letter. The paper was thicker than regular printer paper, the kind Marcus used when he was writing something he wanted to last. He had written to me before that way, 2 or 3 times in 22 years, actual letters on actual paper, because he said emails were too easy to ignore and too easy to delete. I unfolded it. Claire looked toward the window. The letter started with his name for me, not Owen. He had called me Calloway since 10th grade, after a teacher mispronounced my last name in front of the class, and Marcus had found it so funny he would not let it die. I had not heard it in over a year. Seeing it written there in his handwriting, lowercase, easy, like he was pulling up a chair, was the first moment I understood that this was real in a different way than the memorial had been real. The memorial had been about everyone else's grief. This was about his voice. I will not tell you everything the letter said. That belongs to me and to him, and to the particular version of a 22-year friendship that no one else was inside of. But I will tell you the shape of it. He wrote that he was sorry he had not told me about the diagnosis earlier. He said he had been working through it alone for a while, and by the time he was ready to say it out loud, the timing kept being wrong, or he kept telling himself the timing was wrong, which he admitted was probably not the same thing. He said I would have shown up and started trying to fix something, and for a while he had needed to sit with it himself before he let anyone try to fix anything. That was fair. He was right about me. He wrote about things we had done, not the big trips or the major moments people tend to catalog. The small ones. A specific afternoon in his truck going nowhere in particular. A conversation we had once at 2 a.m. in his kitchen when neither of us could sleep, and we ended up talking for 3 hours about things that made no sense to summarize to anyone who wasn't there. Small things. The kind you forget until someone writes them down, and then suddenly you remember them so completely it almost hurts. Near the end, he wrote about Claire. He asked me to check on her. Not in those words exactly. He wrote it the way Marcus wrote things he meant seriously, without fanfare, like it was obvious, but needed saying anyway. He wrote that she was going to be fine because she was the most capable person he knew. But that fine and okay were different things, and he wanted someone to know the difference with her. He said I was the only person he trusted to understand what he meant by that. He wrote, "She will not ask for help. She never does, but she responds to company. Just be around. You know how." I put the letter down. I pressed my hands flat on the table. Claire was still looking at the window, one hand around the mug, quiet like she had given me the room even though she was sitting 2 feet away. "He asked you to check on me, didn't he?" she said. Not a question. "He did." She nodded slowly. "He asked me to check on you, too." She looked at me then. He was thorough. I laughed once before I could stop it. She did too, a real one, the kind that comes out because the other option is crying, and sometimes you pick the laugh because you need to stay upright a little longer. "That was so Marcus," I said. "Completely," she said. The laugh faded out and the quiet came back, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not empty, full of something I did not have a clean word for. I picked up the pocket knife, turned it over in my hand. The handle was scratched from years of being used, not just carried. Marcus had actually used it. That mattered in a way that was hard to explain. "He kept it," I said. "He used it." Claire reached across and touched the side of the handle lightly, then pulled her hand back. "He'd take it camping. He used it for everything. I used to tell him it was too nice to use for everything, and he'd say that was the whole point of having something nice." I set it down carefully. "You said the USB drive is first," I said. He was specific about that. I did not have a laptop on the table. I had one in the other room. I stood up to get it, and Claire cleared space on the table without me asking her to. We sat side by side, and I plugged in the drive and opened the single file on it, a video. Marcus appeared on the screen, and I had to stop myself from saying something because the instinct was to say his name. He looked good, healthy even. This must have been early, before the diagnosis had done much, or maybe it had not progressed far yet. He was sitting at the desk in his home office. The one with the bookshelves behind him that Claire had organized alphabetically by his last name, and he had always pretended to hate the system while secretly keeping it perfect. He said, "Hey, Calloway." I stopped the video for a second, just a second, then started it again. He talked for 11 minutes. He was funny in the first 3 because that was Marcus. He could not be serious for very long without balancing it with something that made you forget to brace yourself. He talked about the knife and why he was putting it in the box. He talked about the photograph, which I had not looked at yet, but which turned out to be from a trip we took in our late 20s, just the two of us. 4 days in the mountains with bad weather and a cabin that leaked at one corner, and we'd had the best time of our lives for reasons that still made no complete sense. He said he had kept that photo in his desk drawer for 12 years. Not framed in the drawer where he could take it out when he needed to remember that some things worked out despite being completely chaotic going in. Then he talked about Claire. He said it straight. No decorating it, no long setup. He said, I am not asking you to do anything weird, Calloway, so don't make a face at the camera. But I know you, and I know her, and I know that both of you are going to be too busy being okay to actually be okay. So somebody has to be looking out for somebody, and you're the only person I trust enough to ask. He paused on the screen. Then he said, she's going to be fine. I need you to make sure fine doesn't become the whole ceiling. I heard Claire breathe out slowly beside me. Marcus looked into the camera for a moment. Then he said, and you should know that you've been one of the best things in my life since we were 12 years old, and you let me copy your math homework, even though we both knew mine was wrong, and you just fixed it without saying anything. That was the first decent thing anyone ever did for me, and I never forgot it. He said a few more things after that. Then he said goodbye in the casual way he said everything important, like it was obvious and did not need ceremony. The video ended. The room was very quiet. Claire had both hands around the mug again. She was not crying, but her jaw was tight in the way people's jaws get when they are deciding not to. I have not watched that, she said. He told me some of what was in it. Do you want to watch it alone? She thought about that. No, I think I'd rather have watched it here the first time. She looked at me sideways. If that's all right. Yeah, I said. That's all right. We sat there for a while. The soup she had brought was in a container on the table, and neither of us suggested heating it yet, but nobody left either. Eventually, she got up and found a pot and put the soup on the stove without asking where anything was, because she had been in this kitchen before, years ago, a handful of times when Marcus and I would all end up here after something. She moved around it like she remembered. I sat at the table and watched her and did not know what to do with the fact that this felt normal and nothing about it was. He was right, I said. You're not going to ask for anything. She stirred the soup without turning around. I have a whole system. I know. He told me about the system. Of course he did. She turned slightly. Does the system bother you? No, I said. I have one too. She smiled at the pot. He said that also. I looked at the wooden box still open on the table, the letter folded back up, the knife, the sealed envelope I had not opened yet, the photograph of two younger men on a mountain in bad weather looking happier than people should look in that situation. I thought about what Marcus had asked me to do. Not in the letter exactly, and not just in the video either, but in the whole shape of what he had put together and trusted Claire to bring to me. He had been thinking about us, both of us, after him. That was such a specific thing to do, such a Marcus thing to do. Be around, you know how. He asked you to check on me, I said again. How long have you been waiting to come? Claire set 2 bowls on the counter. I came twice and drove past and kept going. Why today? She was quiet for a moment. Because if I waited for a day when it felt like the right time, I was going to wait forever. She looked at me. There is no right time. There's just going or not going. She brought the bowls to the table. We sat across from each other with the wooden box between us and steam rising from the soup and the Saturday morning sitting still outside my windows, like it was not sure what to do with itself either. I drive past the bakery on Clement sometimes, I said. I haven't gone in. Me either. She picked up her spoon. Maybe we go next time. Maybe we do. The soup was good. She had made it herself, I could tell, not from a can. The bread was from the bakery she had not been able to go back to yet, which meant she had faced that one this morning, probably before she drove over here. She had faced it so she could bring it to me. That was not a small thing. I thought about what Marcus had written. She will not ask for help, but she responds to company. I understood what he meant now. She had not asked for help. She had shown up with a box and a bag of groceries and soup she made herself, and she had driven past twice before she came in. None of that was asking for help. All of it was the same thing anyway. After lunch, we sat at the table for another hour. We talked about Marcus without working up to it, the way you can with someone who also knew him completely, where you do not have to explain context or soften things or worry that the other person will get the wrong idea. We talked about the trip in the photograph and the cabin that leaked. She told me things about the last year of his life that I had not known. Small things, good things mostly. The way he had started drawing again, just sketches in a notebook, something he had not done since college. How he had reorganized his whole closet in March of that last year and seemed genuinely pleased with himself about it for weeks. The Sunday mornings. I told her things she had not known, conversations we had over the phone in the last year, things he had said about her that were embarrassing in their straightforwardness, the way Marcus always was. He had not saved the big feeling for private. He said it out loud, clearly, often. She listened to those parts with her hands still on the table, not crying. Something quieter than crying, but not smaller. When she stood up to leave, I walked her to the door. She picked up the paper grocery bag, and I held the door open. She stepped past me onto the front step and then stopped and turned back. "He was right about you," she said. I looked at her. "Which part?" "The math homework part." A small smile. "You fix things without making people feel small for needing them fixed." I did not have an answer for that. She did not seem to need one. She went down the front steps. Halfway to her car, she turned once more. "The bakery on Clement," she said. "Saturday mornings used to be his idea. Maybe it could be ours." I looked at her standing there in the pale morning light, the dark green jacket, her hands easy at her sides, not performing calm, actually having it, the way people do when they have already been through the hardest part and found out they could survive it. "Yeah," I said. "Saturday mornings." She nodded, got in her car. I went back inside and sat at the table. The wooden box was still open. The soup bowls were in the sink. The light through the kitchen window had shifted while we were sitting there, moved across the floor the way it does when time passes without you tracking it. I picked up the letter and read it again, the whole thing. Then I folded it back along his creases, put it in the box, and latched it. Marcus had been thinking about us, after him. He had been careful and specific and thorough, same as always, and he had asked me to do the only thing I was actually capable of, not to fix anything, not to be a hero, just to be around, to know the difference between fine and okay, to show up without making it a ceremony. I had been sitting in this apartment for 14 months, waiting to feel like the future made sense again. I had not understood that sense was not something that came back on its own. You had to walk toward it, usually in the direction of something that scared you a little, usually toward the people who were also walking and pretending they were not. Marcus had known that. He had known it about me. He had known it about Claire. He had loved us both enough to make sure we did not wait forever. I picked up my phone and texted her. "Next Saturday," I wrote. "I'll drive." Her reply came in about 2 minutes. "I'll bring better coffee than yours." I looked at that message for a long second. The apartment felt less like somewhere I was staying temporarily. It felt just barely like somewhere I was choosing to be. That was enough for a Saturday morning. That was exactly enough. Some people leave the world, and the hole they leave behind is so specific you cannot fill it. But you can, sometimes, let it change the shape of things. Let it point you somewhere. Let it tell you which direction to walk and trust that the person who knew you best knew what they were doing when they pointed. Marcus knew what he was doing. He always did. Has someone you lost ever found a way to reach you from the other side of the hardest year? Have you ever had a friend who saw your life more clearly than you did? Tell me in the comments. If this one meant something to you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.